Hey, what's up everyone? This is Dan the Movie Man with another big show for you today. Today we will be talking about the latest A24 film, The Lighthouse.
Tell me, what's a timberman want with being a wickie?
Just looking to earn a living, just like any man. Starting new.
On the run. Keeping secrets, are you?
No, sir.
Why don't you spill your beans?
Now, this film stars Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson as two lighthouse keepers. And in this, they are isolated, working this lighthouse for about 4 weeks. And this is mainly Robert Pattinson's movie told through his perspective on how he starts to descend into madness as certain events occur. Now, here is my review on this. You know, when it comes to certain horror films, it all really depends on the rewatch value. Because, you know, you could watch a certain horror film that's getting rave reviews, such as Hereditary, Midsommar, and you think to yourself, you know, that was good, but I need to be in the right mood to watch that again. With The Lighthouse, this is worth the rewatch value. It is easily, without a doubt, one of, if not the best horror movie of 2019. Just the way how it's filmed, how it's acted out, everything about this film works. Yeah, as I said before, Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson are in this. Dafoe is really good in this. I mean, this is some of his best work ever. I mean, not that he hasn't done any good work before, but this is some of the stuff that really stands out. But this is mainly Robert Pattinson's movie. And I can happily say that Robert Pattinson is no longer the Twilight guy. You know, people who are still worried that, you know, now that he's Batman now in Matt Reeves' 2021 film, if people are still worried about that, I recommend seeing films such as Good Time, High Life, and now The Lighthouse. Because The Lighthouse is easily, without a doubt, Robert Pattinson's best performance in his entire career. Both of them work off really well. And hearing the behind the scenes stuff is really interesting because the way how they rehearse is very different. For example, Willem Dafoe actually loves rehearsing. He comes from a theater background. He has or had a class that he would teach in New York, and he's been doing that for a while. He finds that to be fun. And Pattinson is one of those guys who does not like rehearsals, even though I don't know if he actually does them or he does and he just doesn't care about them. So you have these polar opposites working together, and their chemistry, you can tell that the way that they bounce off at each other just really works. And another thing about this film is that the setting of it, it's set in the 1890s. And there is not a moment where it doesn't feel like that. You know, it just, it actually feels like it is in that time frame. It almost comes off as if Stanley Kubrick was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. That's the best way I could describe this film. The way how it was shot is beautiful. The whole film is in black and white. And it was filmed with 35 millimeter film with an aspect ratio of 1.19. So the black bars that you see on the side, like if you are watching an old TV show on Netflix and you see those black bars there just because the HD hasn't improved to them, that's how it was made. And when it comes to a film like this, it works because it's set in one certain location and it makes the audience feel claustrophobic. And Yeah, so there are certain films that do work like that. Some others don't, just for the sake of wanting the style of it. But from what I was told, the cameras that they use for this are somewhere in between 1918 or 1938. And yeah, in terms of scare-wise, now this film was directed by Roger Eggers, the same man who directed The Witch. And even though that this movie is not as, The Witch is a much more frightening film. After I watched that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna need 4 showers after watching this movie. With this movie, on the other hand, I would say it is very disturbing, but it is, again, worth the rewatch value. Like, you could just watch it with a group of friends, or I could definitely see this being shown in film classes as it shows off certain symbolism, especially if you are a major in Greek mythology. There's a lot of symbolism towards that. It's very trippy. And earlier I said before, it reminded me of a Stanley Kubrick film, like if it was made in the 20s or the 30s, mainly because of the way how the music works, the way how like if you watch something like The Shining and you see a close-up of someone's face just looking right at the camera, looking frightened, not speaking, and the music going on, and then it cuts to something back and forth. And it does stuff like that, and it works. Roger Eggers is someone who understands the craft of horror, someone who really appreciates the work of film. And one thing I was not expecting about this movie, that it is funny. It is actually funny, the way how, especially moments from Willem Dafoe, and be prepared to experience fart jokes. Of all kinds of films, a fart joke or more are in this movie. So when I say that this film is artsy fartsy, I mean that in the pun it is intending. Also, if you look at the poster in the bottom left-hand corner, you could see a mermaid's tail. And I'm not giving anything away here. There is a mermaid in it. And after seeing this movie, I will not look at mermaids the same way as I used to before. And that's all I'll say without giving too much away. In terms of scares, a lot of horror movies rely on jump scares, and some of them work because they're earned. Some of them don't work because they're trying to make a cheap buck out of it. This movie, I cannot remember worth the life of me if I don't believe there is a jump scare at all. The horror more just, in the tagline of the trailer, it will make your mind and soul ring. You're just sitting there, with your mouth hanging open, wondering what is going on. And you're just scratching your head like, oh my God, I can't believe something like this just happened. This can also be something I could see being done as a play. How certain monologues are presented, seeing that it's a two-man act and just one certain setting. I can definitely see this being a play, but I am glad that this worked out as a film. Horror films in today are really hard to make successful nowadays, because before then, we sort of lived in a dark age where horror was just a cheap gimmick to make a quick buck. But now, with directors such as Ari Aster, Jordan Peele, and now Roger Eggers, I feel like we are in a good place where we can really appreciate that kind of genre once again. One thing people might not like about this movie is that it doesn't give straightforward answers. But then again, does it really need to? Because certain movies, have to, and then there are others that don't. For example, if you're watching a franchise, like a trilogy of movies, and in the first two, there are no answers, like you're trying to figure out what just happened, how is this going to affect the outcome of the story later on, then the answers are needed. Because you're giving that to a mainstream media, and a mainstream audience desperately wants answers. And this is not a mainstream movie. Sometimes you're not going to get the answers, and sometimes you're not going to get the answers that you want. But it's a certain craft that these kind of films do where it challenges the audience to make you want to give answers of your own. Like, what does this mean, or what is that supposed to represent? Because is it wrong for a movie to make you think? I don't think so. I never think that that is a bad thing. When I was younger, I used to think that just because, I wanted straightforward answers. But now that when we grow up and we look at complications in film in terms of story, sometimes when it's confusing because the people who are writing it don't know what they want to do because they want to make it complicated for the sake of being complicated. But for this film, it knows what it's doing. It's a very competent horror film, even though it's not as scary as The Witch. I would say the best kind of category, I would say that this is more of a psychological horror, or just a very trippy horror film. If I keep saying more, I think I'm gonna go into spoiler territory, and I don't want to do that. The good news is that this movie is playing on the Cape, and hopefully it is still there. And if it's not, find a local theater that is playing this movie, and I highly recommend that you do. That's pretty much what I have to say about this movie. The final verdict for The Lighthouse is an A+. The performances are phenomenal. Best way I could describe, especially Pattinson, since this is his best performance ever, the best way I could describe it, it's like Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood. It's that good of a performance. And hopefully you all get a chance to see it as well. And hopefully, whoever I come across who watches this and says that they saw The Lighthouse, have a conversation with me about it. We'll go deep into it. So hopefully something like that happens. Well, that's it for today. Until then, this is Dan the Movie Man, signing off.
Whoa, do let me go, me girls, do let me go. Hurrah!